He hired a starving orc girl to clean his house, but her unexpected gratitude left him stunned. Pike found her on a Tuesday, which was fitting, because Tuesdays had always been the day when life reminded him that predictability was a lie people told themselves to feel safe. She was curled against the stone wall of his workshop, trying to make herself small, which was the kind of problem you faced when you were an orc in a human city. You could fold yourself into the tightest corner you could find, and you'd still be too green, too tall, too wrong to disappear. Her skin had that greyish tint that came from not eating, not the romantic kind of hunger you read about in stories. The kind that made your body start eating itself from the inside out. The kind that turned muscle into memory and bones into promises your body couldn't keep. Pike had been a carpenter for 32 years. He knew what wood looked like when it was about to break. She had that same quality. The moment right before the snap, when all the strength that used to hold something together was down to one final fiber that was just done. Most people in Millhaven walked past her. That wasn't surprising. Orcs in human cities were the kind of thing people pretended not to see, like beggars or open sewers or their own slowly dying dreams. You acknowledged them, and suddenly you had to do something about them. Easier to develop very specific and convenient blindness. Pike stopped. He wasn't sure why. Maybe because it was exactly 3 years since Emma had died, and grief had this way of making you do stupid things on anniversaries. Maybe because the girl, and she was a girl, despite the tusks and the green skin, looked up at him with eyes that reminded him of a dog he'd had as a child. The kind of eyes that had given up on hoping, but hadn't quite figured out how to give up on living. "You hungry?" Pike asked. She stared at him, probably trying to figure out if this was a trap. In her world, kindness from humans usually came with teeth attached. "I'm not asking for your life story," Pike said. "I'm asking if you want food." Her voice came out rough, like she hadn't used it in days. "Why? Does it matter?" "It always matters when humans are kind." She said kind the way you'd say poisoned, like it was just violence that hadn't shown its face yet. Pike thought about that. She wasn't wrong. Kindness in Millhaven usually came with conditions. Do this, believe that, be less of whatever you are and more of what we need you to be. "Fair point," he said, "but I'm old, tired, and my wife died 3 years ago today. I'm making stew anyway. You can eat it or not. Your choice." She followed him home, keeping distance, probably calculating how fast she could run if he pulled a weapon. Pike's house was small, 2 rooms and a kitchen that Emma had always complained was too cramped. Now it just felt empty in a way that had nothing to do with size. He pointed to a chair. "Sit." She didn't sit. Orcs didn't sit with their backs to doors. Prey sat. Orcs positioned. Pike shrugged and started cooking. The stew was simple. Potatoes, carrots, some salted pork that was probably older than it should be. Emma would have added herbs, would have made it taste like something that mattered. Pike just made it taste like food. The orc girl watched him. Not with hunger, with the kind of attention people paid to things that might kill them. When he finally put the bowl in front of her, she didn't grab it. She looked at it like it might explode. "It's not poisoned," Pike said. "How would I know?" Pike took the bowl, ate a spoonful, gave it back. She ate. Not fast, not desperate, with the kind of control that came from years of not having enough, from knowing that if you ate too fast, you'd throw it all up and waste the only meal you might get. When she finished, Pike put another bowl in front of her. She stared at it. "Why?" "Because you're still hungry. I have nothing to pay you with." "Did I ask you to pay me?" She ate the second bowl slower, like she was trying to make it last, like she was storing the memory of being full because she didn't know when it would happen again. Pike waited until she was done. "You have a name?" "Zykra." "I'm Pike." He paused. "You have a place to sleep?" "No." "You have anywhere to go?" "No." Pike looked at the empty chair across from him. Emma's chair. Nobody had sat in it for 3 years. "I have a spare room. Roof doesn't leak. Bed's decent, and my workshop is a disaster. If you want to work, cleaning, organizing, whatever needs doing, I'll give you food and a place to stay." Zykra stared at him. "That's it. That's it. You don't want—" She trailed off. But Pike understood what she wasn't saying. what humans usually wanted from orc girls who had nowhere to go and no way to say no. "I want someone to clean my workshop," Pike said. "Nothing else. You work, you eat, you sleep. You don't work, you leave. Simple." Nothing in her life had ever been simple, but she nodded. That was how it started, with stew and a spare room and a transaction that made sense to both of them. What neither of them knew was that some transactions change you. Some debts aren't paid with work or coin. Some are paid with the kind of gratitude that rewrites what you thought you knew about monsters and men. The next morning, Pike woke up to the smell of food cooking, which was wrong. Nobody cooked in his house, except him. Not for 3 years. Not since Emma's hands had gotten too weak to hold a spoon, and her body had decided it was done fighting whatever was eating her from the inside. He went to the kitchen. Zikra was standing over the stove, stirring something in a pot. She looked up when he entered. "I didn't know what humans eat for breakfast," she said. "So I made what orcs eat, grain porridge with dried meat. If you don't like it, I can—" "It's fine," Pike said, because his voice wasn't working properly, and fine was all he could manage. She'd also swept the floor, organized the dishes, wiped down the table that Pike had been meaning to clean for 6 weeks. The house looked like someone lived in it. Not like a place where a man was slowly forgetting how to be a person. They ate in silence. The porridge was good. Better than good. It had spices Pike didn't recognize. Flavors that didn't belong in Millhaven, but somehow belonged in his kitchen. After breakfast, Pike showed her the workshop. It was the kind of disaster that happened when a man lost his wife and forgot how to care about things like organization, or not leaving wood shavings everywhere, or putting tools back where they belonged. Zikra looked at it like a general surveying a battlefield. "How long since anyone cleaned this?" she asked. 3 years, Pike said. "Give or take." She nodded. Like that explained everything. Like she understood what it meant when a man stopped taking care of the place where he used to build things with his hands. Pike went to a corner and pulled out an old broom. The handle was carved with small flowers. Emma's work. She'd spent hours on it, turning a simple cleaning tool into something beautiful, because that's what Emma did. She found beauty in places where nobody thought to look for it. He held it out to Zikra. "This was my wife's." Zikra took it carefully, like it was made of glass. Her fingers traced the carved flowers. "These are delicate." She had delicate hands. Pike's voice cracked. He cleared his throat. "Anyway, that's yours now, if you want it." Zikra looked at the broom, then at Pike, then back at the broom. "You're giving this to me? You need a broom, I have a broom." Seems straightforward. But it wasn't straightforward. Not to her. In orc culture, you didn't give someone something that mattered to you. You didn't hand over pieces of the people you'd lost. You didn't trust strangers with your grief. "I'll take care of it," Zikra said quietly. "I know," Pike said. And somehow, he did. She started cleaning. Pike went back to his workbench and pretended to work on a chair that someone had commissioned 2 months ago, but mostly he watched her. Not in a creepy way. In the way you watch something you didn't know you needed to see. She moved through the workshop like water, efficient, thorough, finding spaces that Pike had forgotten existed. She didn't just clean, she organized, sorted, created order from chaos in a way that made Pike realize how much chaos he'd been living in. Around midday, Pike's neighbor, Crane, stopped by. Crane was the kind of man who'd been suspicious his entire life and had never found a reason to stop. He took one look at Zikra, and his hand went to the wooden cross hanging around his neck. Touched it. Like that would protect him from the dangerous orc girl who was currently organizing screws by size. "Pike," Crane said slowly. "That's an orc." "Her name's Zikra," Pike said. "That's an orc," Crane repeated, like Pike was hard of hearing. "In your workshop. Working. She's cleaning." Pike picked up a chisel. "I hired her." Crane's face did something complicated. Like he was trying to feel multiple emotions at once, and they were all fighting for space. "You hired an orc." "Seems that way." "Pike." Crane stepped closer, lowered his voice. "They're dangerous. You know that, right? They're not like us. They're—" "Cleaning my workshop," Pike said. "Doing a better job than I've done in 3 years. If that's dangerous, I'll take it." Crane looked at Zikra. She'd stopped working, was standing very still, like prey that knows it's been spotted. Her hand on the broom handle was tight enough that her knuckles were lighter green than the rest of her. "It's your funeral," Crane muttered. He left, made sure to slam the door. Pike expected Zikra to say something, to defend herself, or be angry or scared. She just went back to cleaning. But her shoulders were tighter, her movements more careful, like she'd remembered that this was a human city and she was an orc, and nothing she did would ever make her safe. That evening, after she'd finished for the day, Pike made dinner. More stew. He wasn't good at variety. Zikra ate quietly. Then she spoke. "That man, your neighbor, he's afraid of me. He's afraid of everything," Pike said. "Don't take it personally. He touched his holy symbol when he saw me. Crane touches his holy symbol when he sees pigeons. He thinks they're spying for the devil." That got a small sound from Zikra. Not quite a laugh, but close. "In my clan," she said slowly, "we believed humans were without honor, that you fought with poison instead of strength, with lies instead of truth, that you couldn't be trusted. Your clan wasn't entirely wrong," Pike said. Zikra looked at him. "But you gave me food, a room, work. You didn't have to. Maybe I'm the exception. Or maybe," Zikra said quietly, "my clan was wrong about more than I thought." They ate the rest of the meal in silence, but it was a different kind of silence, the kind that didn't need filling. The days turned into a week, the week turned into 2. Zikra cleaned the workshop until it looked like it had when Emma was alive, when Pike used to care about things like swept floors and organized tools. She fixed things Pike hadn't even realized were broken. She worked with the kind of dedication that came from understanding that this might be temporary, that kindness might vanish, that you didn't waste opportunities when they came. And Pike watched his house come back to life, slowly, like a plant that had been forgotten in a corner and suddenly remembered how to grow. But Millhaven was watching too. The market vendors, the neighbors, the people who passed Pike's workshop and saw an orc inside and couldn't understand why she wasn't in chains or a cage or whatever place they'd decided orcs belonged. Ivy, the vegetable seller, started leaving extra carrots when Pike came by. Never said anything, just put them in his bag with a look that said she understood something about loneliness and second chances. But others weren't so kind. Graffiti appeared on Pike's wall one night. 3 words in crude paint. "Orc lover traitor." Pike scrubbed it off before Zikra could see it, but she saw it anyway. Orcs had good eyes for the kind of hate that was painted on walls. "You don't have to keep me," she said that evening. "I know. People are angry. They think that I'm—" "I know what they think," Pike said. "I don't care. You should care. Humans don't hire orcs. It's not natural." Pike put down the piece of wood he was sanding. "You know what's not natural? Living in a house for 3 years that feels like a tomb. Going to bed every night in a room that still smells like someone who isn't there anymore. Walking past the chair where she used to sit and pretending it doesn't hurt to see it empty." He paused. "You being here? That's the first thing that's felt natural in 3 years." Zikra stared at him. "You barely know me. I know you work hard. I know you don't steal. I know you make breakfast without being asked, and you take care of my wife's broom like it's precious. That's enough." "In orc culture," Zikra said slowly, "there's a concept, Kragthar. It means life debt. When someone saves you, truly saves you, not just from death, but from being nothing, you owe them everything, your strength, your loyalty, your life if necessary." "I don't want your life," Pike said. "I know," Zikra said. "That's why I want to give it." Pike didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing, just went back to sanding. But something had shifted. Some invisible line had been crossed. They weren't employer and employee anymore. They weren't human and orc. They were something else, something that didn't have a word in either of their languages. 3 weeks in, everything changed. It was a Saturday, market day. Pike was at his workbench, working on a cabinet that refused to be square no matter how many times he measured it. Zikra was sweeping. And then the door opened. The orc who walked in wasn't like Zikra. He was tall, the kind of tall that had to duck through doorways. His skin was darker green, battle scars covered his arms, and his throat had a scar that ran from ear to ear, the kind of wound that should have killed him but didn't, because orcs were too stubborn to die from things that merely cut their throats. "Zykra," he said. His voice sounded like rocks grinding, like something had broken in his vocal cords and healed wrong. Zykra dropped the broom. Her face went white. Well, as white as green skin could go. Drusk. The orc, Drusk, looked around the workshop, at the clean floors, the organized tools, at Pike. His eyes were the color of old amber. They didn't blink. "You've done well for yourself," Drusk said to Zykra. "Living with humans, cleaning their floors. I almost didn't recognize you. Where's your pride?" "I left it in the clan," Zykra said. Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. "When the clan left me to starve." "You broke the law," Drusk said. "You questioned the war chief. You spoke against the raid. You chose weakness over strength. Exile was mercy. 27 humans died in that raid," Zykra said, "including children. That wasn't strength, that was murder." Drusk's face didn't change, but his hand moved to the axe on his belt. "Careful, Zykra. Even here, treason is treason." Pike stood up. He wasn't tall, wasn't particularly strong, but he'd lived 47 years, and he'd learned that sometimes you just had to stand. "You need to leave." Drusk looked at him. Really looked. Like Pike was a chair he was considering breaking. "This doesn't concern you, human." "She works for me," Pike said. "That makes it concern me." Drusk smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the kind of smile people wore when they were deciding how much violence they felt like committing. "You think you can protect her? You think your human laws mean anything to orc justice?" "I think," Pike said carefully, "that you came to my workshop, on my property, and threatened someone under my roof. I think that means you need to leave. Now." For a moment, nothing happened. Drusk didn't move. Pike didn't move. Zykra stood between them, holding the broom like she'd forgotten how to let go. Then Drusk laughed. It sounded like something breaking. "You've gotten soft, Zykra, living with humans, pretending to be one of them. But you're not. You never will be. Green skin doesn't wash clean, and when the clan comes for you, and we will come, your human friend here won't be able to stop us." He left. Didn't slam the door, just walked out like he'd done nothing more threatening than deliver a package. Pike looked at Zykra. She was shaking, not visibly, but in the way bones shake when everything else is trying very hard to hold still. "How long?" Pike asked. "How long what? How long before they come?" Zykra finally put down the broom. Sat on the floor because her legs had stopped holding her up. "I don't know. A week, a month. Drusk doesn't work alone. He was second in command. He enforces clan law. If he's here, it means they sent him to bring me back. And if you don't go," Zykra looked at him, "then they kill everyone who helped me. That's the law. You protect a traitor, you become a traitor." Pike should have been afraid. Should have told her to leave, should have done the smart thing that would keep him alive and safe and not involved in orc clan politics. But all he could think about was 3 weeks ago, about Zykra curled against his workshop wall, trying to make herself small, about how she'd eaten that first bowl of stew like it was a miracle, about the broom with carved flowers and how carefully she'd held it. "Then I guess I'm a traitor," Pike said. "Pike?" "No." He sat down on the floor next to her. "Listen, I've lived 47 years. I've been a carpenter, a husband, a widower. I've made chairs and tables and cabinets that'll outlive me. And you know what? None of that mattered. Not really. Not until 3 weeks ago when I found a starving orc girl trying to disappear into a wall." He paused. "You gave me Kragthar, that life debt thing, but you got it backwards. I'm the one who owes you. I don't understand." "You made my house feel like a home again," Pike said simply. "You gave me a reason to get up in the morning that wasn't just going through motions. You made breakfast. You fixed things. You cared. And I haven't had someone care about my space, my work, my life in 3 years. So yeah, if your clan wants to come, let them come. They'll have to go through me first." Zykra looked at him like he'd started speaking a language she didn't know. "You'd die for me?" "I'd fight for you," Pike said. "There's a difference." That night Pike couldn't sleep. He lay in bed and listened to the house creak. Millhaven at night had its own language, the sound of horses on cobblestones, drunk men singing badly, dogs barking at nothing. And underneath it all, the quiet breathing of someone in the next room who was probably not sleeping either. Around midnight, Pike got up, went to the kitchen. Zykra was already there, sitting at the table, holding Emma's broom. "Couldn't sleep?" Pike asked. "Orcs don't sleep well when they're hunted." Pike sat down. "Tell me about your clan." So she did. Told him about growing up in the Dragon Teeth Mountains, about learning to fight before she learned to read, about the war chief who valued strength above everything, strength in battle, strength in silence, strength in following orders without question, about the raid on a human village that she'd spoken against, about how questioning the war chief was the same as questioning the clan, about exile. About watching her clan leave her in human territory, with nothing but the clothes on her back and the certainty that she'd die within a week. "Why did you speak against the raid?" Pike asked. "Because I'd seen the village," Zykra said. "Weeks before. I'd been scouting, and I saw children playing, old people sitting in the sun, families. It wasn't a military target, it was just people. And the war chief didn't care. He said humans were all soldiers, that their children grew up to be soldiers, that killing them early was mercy. But you didn't believe that." "I didn't know what to believe," Zykra said. "I'd been taught my whole life that humans were the enemy, that you were cruel and weak and dishonorable. But then I saw those children playing, and they looked happy, like orc children. And I couldn't reconcile that." Pike understood. He'd seen it too, the way people turned other people into enemies by refusing to see them as people at all. The way orc became a word that meant monster instead of person. The way human meant the same thing to Zykra's clan. "What happened to the village?" Pike asked. Zykra's hands tightened on the broom. "What always happens. 27 dead. Houses burned, survivors scattered, and the war chief called it a victory." They sat in silence. The kind of silence that held all the words they weren't saying, all the grief and guilt and rage that didn't have anywhere else to go. "I'll talk to the city guard tomorrow," Pike said finally. "They won't help. I'm an orc. They might help me. I'm a citizen. I pay taxes, and I'm being threatened." Zykra looked at him. "You'd really do that? Go to the human authorities? For me?" "I'd do a lot of things for you," Pike said. "Get some sleep. We'll figure it out in the morning." But morning came too fast, and with it came Drusk, not alone this time. He brought 3 more orcs. They stood outside Pike's workshop, like a wall of muscle and violence and inevitability. Pike opened the door. "Can I help you?" "You can give us Zykra," Drusk said, "and we'll leave peacefully. And if I don't, then we take her and burn your workshop, and make sure everyone in this human city knows what happens when you interfere with orc justice." Pike felt Zykra behind him, felt her hand on his shoulder. She was trying to move past him, trying to step outside and end this before it started. But Pike didn't move. He stood in the doorway like a particularly stubborn piece of furniture. "No," Pike said. Drusk's eyes narrowed. "I gave you a choice, human, and I made it." One of the other orcs, younger, angrier, took a step forward. "Move, or we'll move you." Pike didn't move. He'd spent 32 years working with wood. He knew that the most important part of any structure was the part that held everything else up. The load-bearing wall, the foundation, the single piece that, if removed, made everything else collapse. He was going to be that piece, even if it meant breaking. Drusk raised his hand. The other orc stopped. "You're making a mistake, human." "Probably," Pike said. "I'm good at those. We could kill you, right now. Your laws won't stop us." "Maybe," Pike said, "but you'd have to explain to the city guard why 4 orcs murdered a citizen in broad daylight, and I'm guessing that would make things complicated for your clan." Drusk smiled, that terrible smile that said violence was just a breath away. "You're clever for a human, but cleverness doesn't stop axes." "Maybe not," Pike said, "but witnesses do." He gestured. People were watching now, gathering in the street. Crane was there, still clutching his holy symbol. Ivy was there too, holding a vegetable like a weapon. Others, Neighbors who'd never spoken to Pike, strangers who'd just been passing by, all of them watching, all of them seeing what happened when orcs threatened a citizen. Drusk looked at the crowd, looked at Pike, looked at Zekra, still standing behind Pike like she couldn't quite believe what was happening. "This isn't over," Drusk said. "I didn't think it was," Pike replied. The orcs left, walked away like they'd just been doing some casual visiting. But everyone knew. Everyone had seen. And in a city like Millhaven, seeing was the same as choosing sides. The crowd dispersed slowly. Crane approached. "You're an idiot, Pike." "Probably. That orc girl isn't worth dying for." Pike looked at Crane, at this man who'd been his neighbor for 15 years, who'd never liked him much but had tolerated him, who was standing here now with judgment in his eyes and fear in his hand on his holy symbol. "Everyone's worth dying for," Pike said quietly. "You just have to decide who you're willing to die for. I made my choice." Crane left, shaking his head, probably going home to tell his wife about Pike's suicide by orc plans. But Ivy stayed. She walked up, held out a sack of vegetables. "For her," she said, nodded toward Zekra. "Girl needs to eat, especially if she's going to fight." "She's not going to fight," Pike said. "Everyone fights," Ivy said. "Question is what they're fighting for." She pressed the sack into his hands. "And I think she's fighting for the same thing you are, something worth keeping." Pike took the vegetables. "Thank you." Ivy shrugged. "We take care of our own. Even when our own is an orc girl who cleans workshops." She walked away, but as she left she turned back. "You're a good man, Pike. Your wife would be proud." Pike stood there holding vegetables and trying not to cry, which was stupid. He was 47 years old, too old to cry over carrots and kindness, but Emma would have loved this, would have loved Zekra, would have sat her down and asked about orc cooking and taught her the recipe for that stew that Pike could never get right, would have made them both laugh and made the house feel full in ways that had nothing to do with bodies and everything to do with souls. He went inside. Zekra was sitting on the floor, still holding the broom. She looked up when he entered. "Why?" she asked. "Why what? Why would you do that? Stand there like you matter?" Pike sat down next to her. "Because you do. I'm an orc. You're a person. Your people don't see it that way. Some of them do." He thought of Ivy, of the vegetables, of the fact that she'd called Zekra our own. Some of them see. Zekra set down the broom, looked at her hands. They were shaking. "In my clan, we have stories about humans who showed kindness to orcs. They're all tragic. The humans always die. The kindness always gets punished, because the world doesn't allow for bridges between species, only walls." "Maybe the world's wrong," Pike said. "Or maybe the stories are right, and I'm going to get you killed." "Maybe," Pike said, "but at least I'll die for something that matters. That's more than most people get." They sat on the floor of the workshop, surrounded by the smell of wood and sawdust, and the ghost of Emma's perfume that Pike swore he could still smell sometimes. And neither of them said what they were both thinking, that Drusk would come back, that next time there wouldn't be witnesses, that some stories only ended one way, and happily ever after wasn't one of them. But for now they had this moment, this space, this small pocket of time where a human carpenter and an exiled orc sat together in a workshop and pretended that the world outside wasn't slowly closing in. The next few days felt like breathing underwater. Possible but not pleasant. Pike kept working. Zekra kept cleaning. They went through the motions of normal life while both knowing that Normal had left the building and wasn't coming back. Pike went to the city guard, filed a complaint. The guard captain, a man named Harrow, who had a face like old leather and eyes that had seen too many things, listened politely, wrote down notes, promised to look into it. "Look," Harrow said when Pike was done talking, "I understand your concern, but Orc clan law, that's tricky. They govern themselves. We govern ourselves. As long as they don't break our laws, we don't interfere in their business." "They threatened to burn my workshop," Pike said. "Did they burn it?" "Well, no. Then they haven't broken any laws. Threats aren't crimes unless they're carried out." Pike felt something cold settle in his stomach. So you're saying I have to wait until they actually hurt someone before you'll help? Harrow had the decency to look uncomfortable. I'm saying that interfering in Orc clan justice is complicated. If the girl's been exiled, she's technically under Orc jurisdiction, not ours. She lives in my house, in a human city. How is that not our jurisdiction? Because she's an Orc, Harrow said simply. Like that explained everything. Like species trumped location. Like some people were never really citizens no matter where they lived. Pike left the guard station feeling like he'd been punched in the soul. He understood now. The city would protect him right up until it became inconvenient. Right up until it meant actually confronting the reality that Orcs and humans both bled red and both deserve safety. When he got home, Zykra was cooking dinner. She looked up when he entered. How did it go? They'll help, Pike lied. Zykra studied his face. No, they won't. Zykra, it's fine. She stirred the pot. I didn't expect them to. Humans protect humans. Orcs protect orcs. That's how the world works. That's not how the world should work. Should and does are different countries, Pike. I live in the one that is, not the one that should be. They ate dinner in silence. The food was good. Zykra had a gift for making simple ingredients taste like they mattered, but Pike barely tasted it. All he could think about was Harrow's face. About how easy it was for good people to do nothing when doing something meant risking something. After dinner, Pike did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He went to the small chest in his bedroom where he kept Emma's things, opened it, pulled out a leather journal with a pressed flower on the cover, Emma's journal. The one she'd kept right up until the end, when her hands had gotten too weak to hold a pen. He sat on the bed and read the last entry. My dear Pike, it said in Emma's careful handwriting. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and I'm sorry. Sorry for leaving you. Sorry for the pain. Sorry for all the things we won't get to do together. But I need you to promise me something. Don't let grief make you small. Don't let my death be the thing that shrinks your world down to the size of this house and your workshop. The world is bigger than our pain. And there are people out there, people who need the kindness that you've always had, but rarely showed because you thought I was the one who was supposed to be kind. Be kind, Pike, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. That's when kindness matters most. Love you forever, Emma. Pike closed the journal, sat there holding it like it was the most fragile thing in the world. Emma had known. Somehow she'd known that he'd need this reminder, that he'd need permission to keep living after she was gone. Permission to care about someone else. Permission to be the person she'd always seen in him, even when he couldn't see it himself. He went back to the kitchen. Zykra was washing dishes. Pike stood in the doorway and watched her. This young Orc woman who'd stumbled into his life 3 weeks ago and somehow made it make sense again. Zykra, Pike said. She turned, water dripping from her hands. I'm not letting them take you. Pike, no. Listen. He walked over. I know what you're going to say, that it's not worth it, that I've done enough, that you should just go back to your clan and face whatever justice they have waiting. But here's the thing. He paused. My wife died 3 years ago, and for 3 years I've been a ghost in my own house, going through motions, pretending to be alive. And then you showed up. And suddenly I had a reason to make breakfast, to clean, to care about whether my workshop was organized or not. You gave me my life back. So no, I'm not letting them take you, because that would be the same as letting them take me. Zykra stared at him, and then she did something Pike didn't expect. She cried. Not the loud, dramatic crying you see in stories. The quiet kind. The kind that happened when you'd been holding something in for so long that it finally leaked out through cracks you didn't know you had. No one's ever fought for me before, she whispered. Well, Pike said, there's a first time for everything. They stood in the kitchen, water still dripping from her hands, both of them broken in ways that didn't show on the outside. Both of them holding on to something that the world said shouldn't exist. A friendship between species, a connection across divides, a small pocket of hope in a world that thrived on walls. 4 days later, Drusk came back. Alone this time. He didn't knock, Just opened the workshop door like he owned the place. Pike was working on a table. Zykra was sweeping. Both of them froze. "I came to make a deal," Drusk said. Pike set down his hammer. "I'm listening. Zykra comes back to the clan, faces trial. If she's found innocent, she can return here, live her human life. No one will bother her again. And if she's found guilty," Pike asked, "then she faces justice, as is our law." Zykra laughed. It was a bitter sound. "That's not a deal, Drusk. That's an execution with extra steps. It's more than you deserve." Drusk looked at her. "You broke clan law, spoke against the war chief. That's treason. The fact that I'm offering a trial at all is mercy." "Mercy," Zykra repeated. "Like the mercy you showed those children in the village? Like the mercy you showed to anyone who questions orders?" Drusk's face hardened. "Careful, Zykra. You're already on trial for treason. Don't add disrespect to the list." "I'll go," Zykra said suddenly. "No," Pike said. "Pike!" "No." He stood up, walked over to stand between them. Again, because apparently that was his thing now. "She's not going back. Not for a trial, not for mercy, not for anything." Drusk studied him. "You really care about her?" "Yes." "Why?" Pike thought about that. About how to explain to an orc warrior that kindness didn't need reasons, that caring about someone wasn't a transaction, that sometimes you just found someone who made your broken pieces fit better, and you held on to them because letting go meant going back to being broken alone. "Because she makes good breakfast," Pike said finally, "and because she's careful with my wife's broom, and because when she sweeps she doesn't miss the corners, and because 3 weeks ago she was dying, and I gave her food, and she looked at me like I'd handed her the world." Drusk shook his head slowly. "You're a fool. Probably. She's an orc. You're human. This, whatever this is, it can't last." "Maybe not," Pike said, "but it's lasting right now, and right now is all anyone really has." Drusk turned to Zykra. "Last chance. Come back. Face the trial. Live with honor." "I have honor," Zykra said quietly. "I found it here, in this workshop, with this human who gave me food when I was starving and a broom when I needed purpose. My clan taught me that honor meant strength, but Pike taught me that honor means caring about people, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's dangerous, even when the world says you shouldn't." Drusk's hand moved to his axe. "Then you've chosen death, both of you." "Maybe," Pike said, "but we'll choose it together." Drusk looked at them, at this odd pair, a middle-aged human carpenter and a young orc exile, standing in a workshop that smelled like sawdust and hope, holding brooms and hammers instead of weapons, choosing each other over the things that were supposed to matter more. "The clan comes in 3 days, Drusk said. "Not just me, all of us, and there won't be witnesses this time, no crowd to hide behind, just you, her, and the consequences of protecting traitors." He left. The door closed, and Pike and Zykra stood in the sudden silence that felt like the inhale before a storm. "We should run," Zykra said. "Where?" "Anywhere, another city, another country, anywhere that isn't here when they come." Pike looked around his workshop, at the tools he'd collected over 30 years, at the workbench where Emma used to sit and read while he built things, at the broom with carved flowers propped in the corner. "This is my home," Pike said. "I'm not leaving it." "Then you'll die in it." "Maybe." Pike picked up Emma's journal from where he'd left it on the workbench. "But my wife told me not to let grief make me small, told me to be kind even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, and running, that would make me small. That would make me the kind of person who saved someone just to abandon them when it got difficult." "You're not abandoning me. You're surviving. What's the difference?" Zykra didn't have an answer for that. The next 3 days passed like years compressed into hours. Pike worked. Zykra cleaned. They ate meals, talked about nothing important, pretended that Drusk's deadline wasn't approaching like a storm that had already started raining. On the second day, Crane came by, brought a crossbow. "I don't want it," Pike said. "Take it anyway." Crane pressed the weapon into his hands. "I still think you're an idiot." but you're my neighbor, and I've lived next to you for 15 years, and yeah, you're sheltering an orc, and yeah, that's probably going to get you killed. But he trailed off, touched his holy symbol. Emma would have done the same thing. She was always taking in strays, broken birds, sick cats, lost causes. He looked at Zikra. Guess you're just another one of her projects. She's not a project, Pike said. No, Crane agreed. She's a person, and if someone kills her in your workshop, I'll have to live next to where it happened, and I'm already having enough nightmares. He paused. So take the crossbow, learn how to use it, and try not to die. He left before Pike could thank him. On the third day, Ivy came by, brought more vegetables and information. Word spreading, she said, about what's coming. Some people are taking bets on how long you'll last. Others are angry that you're putting the whole city at risk. But she hesitated. There are people who think you're doing the right thing. Not many, but enough that it matters. How many is enough? Pike asked. I don't know, Ivy admitted, but I'm one of them. And so is old Barnaby, who runs the smithy, and Martha, who owns the bakery, and a few others. We're not warriors. We're not going to fight an orc warband, but we're watching. And if they burn your workshop, if they hurt you, people will know, people will remember. It wasn't much, but it was something. Small acts of courage from ordinary people who were just as scared as Pike, but who chose to care anyway. That night, Pike and Zikra sat in the workshop. It was past midnight. Neither of them could sleep. Outside, Millhaven was quiet. The kind of quiet that came before something loud. Tell me about her, Zikra said suddenly. Who? Your wife, Emma. Tell me about her. So Pike did. Told her about how they'd met at a market 20 years ago. About how Emma had been buying flowers and had asked Pike to help her carry them. About how she'd smiled and he'd fallen in love right there between the roses and the turnips. Told her about their wedding in a small chapel with 15 people and a priest who'd forgotten half the ceremony. About the house they'd built together. About the years of small happiness and smaller tragedies. About the sickness that had come slow and cruel. About the last conversation they'd had when Emma could barely speak, but had used her last words to tell him she loved him. She sounds perfect, Zikra said when he was done. She wasn't, Pike said. She was stubborn, overly optimistic, terrible at cooking meat, always burned it, had opinions about everything and never kept them to herself. But she was mine, and I was hers, and that was enough. Do you miss her? Every day. I'm sorry. Don't be. Pike looked at Zikra. She would have liked you, would have taught you her terrible cooking, would have fixed your hair and told you stories and made you laugh, would have stood with me tomorrow when the clan comes. Not because she was brave, but because she believed that people were worth fighting for, all people, even orcs who cleaned workshops and held brooms like they were sacred. Zikra touched the broom, the carved flowers. I'll fight too, tomorrow, when they come. No, Pike said. Pike, no, you're not fighting. You're leaving. Zikra stared at him. What? Crane's going to sneak you out at dawn, take you to the next city, give you enough coin to start over, you'll be safe. And you? I'll be here, buying you time. Zikra shook her head, so hard her hair whipped. No, absolutely not. I'm not letting you. It's not your choice, Pike said gently. I'm choosing, just like you chose to speak against that raid. Just like you chose to accept my offer of work instead of dying in the street. Just like you chose to stay here even knowing what it would cost. Now I'm choosing, and I'm choosing to give you a chance to live. But you'll die. Maybe, Pike said. Or maybe I'll talk them out of it. Or maybe the guard will actually show up. Or maybe Crane's crossbow will be more useful than I think. But even if I die, at least you'll be alive. And that's worth it. Zikra's face did something complicated. You're an idiot. Everyone keeps telling me that. Because it's true. She stood up, walked over to him. In orc culture, there's another concept, korvath. It means shared fate. When you bind yourself to someone so completely that their death is your death, their survival is your survival. You don't just die for them, you live for them, with them, as them. What are you saying? I'm saying, Zykra said, that I'm not leaving, that if you're staying and fighting, then so am I, that we're Korvath now, shared fate. Whatever happens tomorrow, happens to both of us. Pike wanted to argue, wanted to throw her over his shoulder and carry her to Crane's house and lock her in until she agreed to leave. But he saw her face, saw the determination that came from finally having something worth fighting for. All right, Pike said. Shared fate. They shook hands, human style, because neither of them knew how orcs did it, and it seemed right to start a new tradition for this thing they were building that had no name in either culture. Dawn came too fast. Pike woke to the sound of footsteps outside. Lots of footsteps. The kind that came from warriors who weren't trying to be quiet because they didn't need to be. He went to the window, looked out. There were at least a dozen orcs in the street. Drusk was at the front. They weren't carrying axes. They were carrying torches. Pike went to wake Zykra, but she was already awake, already dressed, already holding the broom with carved flowers. You know that's not a weapon, Pike said. I know, Zykra said, but it's what I'm holding, because I'm not a warrior anymore. I'm someone who sweeps floors and makes breakfast and takes care of things, and if I die, I want to die being that person, not the person the clan wanted me to be. Pike picked up Crane's crossbow. He'd spent the last 2 days learning how to load it, how to aim, how to shoot. He wasn't good at it, but he was good enough to be dangerous if dangerous became necessary. They went outside together, stood in front of the workshop. The orcs spread out in a semicircle. Drusk stepped forward. Last chance, Drusk said. Give us Zykra and we'll let you live. No, Pike said. Drusk sighed, like this was tedious. Like killing people was just another chore on his list. Then you both die. The clan has voted. Zykra is guilty of treason. You are guilty of harboring a traitor. The sentence is death. Who voted? Pike asked. Drusk frowned. What? Who voted? Was it the whole clan, or just the war chief, or just you? Pike lowered the crossbow slightly. Because I'm curious. In orc culture, how many people does it take to decide someone should die? Is it majority rule, unanimous? Or does one person just get to decide and everyone else follows? Drusk's face hardened. Careful, human. I'm just asking, Pike said. Because in my culture we have trials, evidence, witnesses. The accused gets to defend themselves, and I'm wondering if your culture does the same. Or if justice is just whatever the strongest orc decides it is. One of the other orcs shifted, uncomfortable, like Pike had poked at something they'd all been trying not to think about. The war chief decides, Drusk said. That's our law. And if the war chief is wrong, Zykra spoke up. If he orders raids on innocent villages, if he kills children, what then? Then we follow orders, because that's what warriors do. No, Zykra said. That's what cowards do. Warriors fight for something. You're just fighting because someone told you to. There's no honor in that. No strength. Just obedience dressed up as loyalty. Drusk's hand tightened on his torch. You dare? I dare, Zykra said, because I've been on the other side now. I've lived with humans. I've seen how they care for each other, how they choose their leaders, how they question orders when orders are wrong. And you know what? They're not perfect. But at least they try. At least they don't pretend that following a tyrant makes them honorable. Several orcs in the group exchanged looks, uncertain looks, like they'd been thinking the same thing but hadn't had the words. Drusk saw it, saw his authority slipping. Enough! We're done talking, burn it, all of it. But before anyone could move, something happened. The orcs in the back parted, and an older orc walked through. Female, grey hair braided with silver, scars that told a lifetime of stories. She had the kind of presence that made everyone else seem smaller just by existing. Drusk, she said quietly. Every orc straightened, including Drusk. Elder Yashra, Drusk said. I didn't expect... No, Yashra said. You didn't, because you thought you could handle this quietly, away from the clan, away from anyone who might question you. She looked at the torches, at the workshop, at Pike and Zykra standing together. But word travels, even to the Dragon Teeth Mountains. And when I heard that you were planning to execute a clan member without proper trial, I decided to see for myself. She's a traitor, Drusk said. According to whom? The war chief is not here, Yashra finished. But I am, and I am clan elder, which means I outrank both you and the war chief when it comes to matters of justice. She walked closer, studied Zikra. Tell me, young one, why did you speak against the raid? Zikra stood straighter, because it was wrong, because we were ordered to kill innocent people, because being strong doesn't mean killing everyone weaker than you. It means protecting those who can't protect themselves. Yashra's eyes narrowed. And you think the clan doesn't do that? I think the clan has forgotten what it means. I think we've become the monsters the humans say we are. Not because we're orcs, but because we've stopped caring about anything except strength and victory. Silence, the kind that pressed down like weight. Then Yashra laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. Good, you have spine, just like your grandmother. Zikra blinked. You knew my grandmother. Fought beside her for 20 years. She questioned the war chief too, more than once. And you know what happened? Nothing, because back then we valued warriors who thought, who questioned, who had the courage to say when something was wrong. She looked at Drusk. But times have changed, haven't they? Drusk said nothing. This raid Zikra spoke against, Yashra continued. Tell me, how many warriors did we lose? None, Drusk admitted. And how many civilians died? 27, including children. Drusk's jaw tightened. Yes, Yashra nodded slowly. Then Zikra was right to question it, and the war chief was wrong to order it. And you, Drusk, are wrong to hunt her for having the courage that the rest of you seem to have lost. The other orcs shifted, uncomfortable, but listening. She broke the law, Drusk insisted. What law? Yashra demanded. The law that says we follow orders without question. That law was made by weak leaders who wanted strong warriors to stop thinking. It's not orc law. It's tyranny disguised as tradition. She turned to face all the orcs. I'm revoking Zikra's exile. As clan elder, I have that authority. She's free to return to the clan or stay here. Her choice. Elder, Drusk said carefully. The war chief won't accept. Then the war chief can challenge me, Yashra said. I'm old, but I'm not dead, and I'll die before I let our clan become a band of murderers who kill children and call it honor. She turned to Pike, looked him up and down. You're the human who took her in. Yes. Pike said, why? Pike thought about all the answers he could give, about Emma's journal, about being kind when it's hard, about how Zikra made breakfast and cleaned his workshop and held a broom like it mattered. But in the end, he gave the simplest answer. Because she was hungry, Pike said, and I had food. Yashra studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled. It was a fierce smile. The kind that had seen battlefields and come out the other side with stories. The world could use more humans like you, and more orcs like her. She looked at Zikra. You have a choice, young one. Come back to the clan. Help me change it from the inside. Or stay here with your human and his workshop. Either way, you're free. Zikra looked at Pike. At the workshop. At the broom she was still holding. I'll stay, she said, at least for now. But I'll visit, help, do what I can. Because you're right, Elder, the clan needs to change, but Pike needs someone to make breakfast, and I'm good at both. Yashra laughed. Good answer. She turned to leave, paused, looked at Drusk. You coming? Or are you going to stay here and burn down the workshop of a man who showed more honor than you've shown in years? Drusk's face was stone, but he turned, walked away. The other orcs followed. And just like that, it was over. The threat, the death sentence, the approaching violence, all of it vanished like morning fog burning off in sunlight. Pike and Zikra stood in the street, holding a crossbow and a broom, breathing like they'd just run a marathon, alive, both of them, together. Well, Pike said after a long moment, that went better than expected. Zikra laughed. The sound was half hysteria, half relief. Better than expected, Pike. We were about to die, but we didn't, but we were going to. But we didn't, Pike repeated. He lowered the crossbow. Come on. Let's go inside. I think we've had enough excitement for one morning. They went back into the workshop, closed the door, and for a moment they just stood there, in the space they'd defended, in the home they'd chosen to keep. "Thank you," Zikra said quietly. "For what? For standing with me, for not running, for being the kind of person who thinks breakfast is worth fighting for." Pike set down the crossbow. "You're worth fighting for. Breakfast is just a bonus." They went back to work, because work was how they made sense of the world. Pike built furniture, Zikra cleaned, and slowly the workshop returned to being a place where things were made instead of a place where people almost died. But something had changed. Some line had been crossed. They weren't just employer and employee anymore, weren't just human and orc sharing space. They were family, the kind you choose, the kind you fight for, the kind that doesn't make sense to anyone else but makes perfect sense to you. Over the next few weeks, life settled into a new rhythm. Zikra still worked, still made breakfast, still held the broom with carved flowers like it was precious. But now she also visited the clan, met with Elder Yashra, started the slow, painful work of changing hearts and minds and centuries of tradition. And Pike kept building furniture, kept living in the house that didn't feel like a tomb anymore, kept remembering Emma without the grief crushing him, because grief was still there, always would be. But now it had company. Now it shared space with new connections, new purposes, new reasons to get up in the morning. Crane came by occasionally, still suspicious, still touching his holy symbol. But now he brought tools instead of crossbows. Small acts of acceptance that were worth more than words. Ivy left vegetables every market day, never said much, just nodded and moved on. But the vegetables kept coming. And slowly, very slowly, other people in Millhaven started to accept what Pike and Zikra had built. Not everyone, not even most, but enough. Enough that when Zikra walked to the market, people didn't cross the street anymore. Enough that children waved instead of hid. Enough that the world started to look a little less like walls and a little more like bridges. 6 months after Zikra had arrived, Pike finished a commission. A large dining table for a wealthy merchant. It was his best work in years. The wood was perfect, the joints seamless, the finish smooth as glass. He stood back and looked at it with satisfaction. "It's beautiful," Zikra said. She'd come up beside him, quiet as always. "It's a table," Pike said. "It's more than that." She ran her hand over the surface. "It's proof that things can be built, that destruction isn't the only option, that creation matters." Pike looked at her, at this young orc woman who'd arrived starving and desperate and had somehow become the most important person in his life after Emma. "You're very philosophical today. Elder Yashra's teaching me. She says orcs need to learn to see beyond strength, beyond victory, to see the value in things that don't fight back." Zikra smiled. "I told her I learned that from a human who gave me a broom." Pike felt something warm in his chest. Pride, maybe, or gratitude, or just the simple knowledge that he'd done something good in a world that didn't always reward good things. "Speaking of which," Zikra said, "I need to visit the clan tomorrow. Yashra's calling a council about changing our approach to humans. It's big, could change everything. You should go," Pike said. "Will you be okay here, alone?" Pike looked around his workshop, at the clean floors, the organized tools, the table he'd just finished that proved his hands still knew how to create. "I'll be fine. Besides, you'll be back. How do you know? Because this is your home too now, and you take care of your home. That's what you do." Zikra nodded, but something crossed her face, something uncertain. "Pike? What if it doesn't work? What if the clan doesn't change? What if everything Yashra and I are trying to do just makes things worse?" Pike thought about that, about Emma's journal, about being kind when it's hard, about the fact that some things were worth trying even when success wasn't guaranteed. "Then you tried," Pike said. "And trying matters, not as much as succeeding, but more than not trying at all." Zikra left the next morning. She took the broom with her, said she wanted to show Yashra, to explain about the carved flowers and what they meant, to demonstrate that humans could make beautiful things too. Pike watched her go, watched this young orc walk down the street of Millhaven with her head high, not hiding, not shrinking, just existing in space that had once tried to kill her for being green. He went back inside. The house felt empty, but not in the bad way, in the way that said someone had left, but would return. In the way that said home was still home, even when it had fewer people in it. Pike worked on a new project, a small chest with a carved lid. He didn't know what it was for yet, just knew that his hands needed to create something. That creation was how he made sense of grief and joy and all the complicated things in between. 3 days later, Zykra came back. She was smiling. The kind of smile that had stories behind it. "Well?" Pike asked. "The council voted," Zykra said. 8-3. The clan is changing its approach. No more raids on civilian targets. No more following orders without question. No more treating all humans as enemies." She paused. "It's not perfect. It's not even close, but it's a start." "That's good," Pike said. "There's more." Zykra set down her bag. The war chief challenged Yashra, just like she said he would, thought she was too old, too weak, that he could take her authority by force. And he found out that being old doesn't mean being weak. Yashra beat him in single combat, in front of the whole clan. Zykra's smile widened. It was glorious. She's war chief now. First female war chief in 3 generations. Pike felt something surge in his chest. Hope, maybe, or the beginning of belief that the world could actually change. So it worked. What you and she were trying to do, it actually worked. "It worked," Zykra confirmed, "because you gave me food 6 months ago when I was starving. Because you stood in front of your workshop with a crossbow you didn't know how to use. Because you showed me that kindness isn't weakness. And I showed the clan, and Yashra showed the war chief. And now," she gestured vaguely, "now things are different." Pike thought about that, about how one small act, giving food to a hungry stranger, had rippled outward, had changed councils and clans and the trajectory of an entire culture, had proven that maybe, just maybe, breakfast was worth fighting for after all. "I made stew," Pike said. "You hungry?" "Starving," Zykra said. They ate together, in the kitchen where Emma used to sit, where Pike used to be alone. Where now there was company and conversation, and the comfortable silence of people who knew each other well enough that words weren't always necessary. After dinner, Zykra looked at Pike. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you still miss her?" "Emma?" Pike didn't answer right away. He looked at Emma's chair, at the empty space that would always be hers. At the ghost of the woman who told him to be kind even when it was hard. "Every day," Pike said finally, "but it doesn't hurt the same way anymore. Now it's softer, like touching a bruise that's mostly healed. It's still there, still tender, but it doesn't stop me from living." He paused. "She'd like you, you know. Would have sat you down and taught you her terrible cooking and fixed your hair and made you laugh until you cried. I wish I could have met her." "Me too." Pike stood up, walked to the chest in his bedroom, came back with Emma's journal. "Here, read this." Zykra took it carefully, opened to the last page, read Emma's final words about being kind even when it's hard, about not letting grief make you small, about living big in a world that tried to shrink you. When she finished, Zykra's eyes were wet. She was wise. She was Emma, Pike said. Like that explained everything. And maybe it did. They sat in the kitchen, holding a journal and a memory, sharing space with a ghost who'd given permission for them to keep living, to keep caring, to keep building bridges in a world that thrived on walls. Outside, Millhaven settled into evening, lanterns lit, dogs barked. People went home to their families and their dinners and their small lives that added up to something bigger than any of them alone. And in a small workshop on Baker Street, a human carpenter and an orc exile sat together, not thinking about species or prejudice or all the reasons the world said they shouldn't work, just thinking about tomorrow's breakfast, about the table that needed finishing, about the broom with carved flowers that would need to sweep again in the morning. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest acts, a bowl of stew, a spare room, a broom with flowers carved by a woman who believed in beauty even in simple things. Sometimes monsters are just people who've been called monsters too many times to remember how to be anything else. Sometimes humans are just people who've been told to be afraid so often that they forgot how to be brave. And sometimes, just sometimes, you find someone who reminds you that you're more than what the world says you are. That kindness isn't weakness. That breakfast matters. That sweeping floors can be an act of revolution when you do it in a world that says you don't belong. Pike built furniture, Zykra cleaned workshops. And together they proved that the most important thing you can build isn't tables or chairs or even bridges between species. It's home. Whatever shape that takes, whoever shares it with you. And that's a foundation that no amount of prejudice or fear or old hatred can break, because some things are stronger than stone, stronger than walls. Stronger than the stories we tell ourselves about who our enemies are supposed to be. Things like stew shared with a stranger, like brooms held with care, like standing in doorways when it would be easier to step aside, like breakfast, made by someone who learned that feeding people is how you save them, and that sometimes being saved means you get to save others in return. One meal at a time, one act of kindness at a time, one morning at a time, until the world looks less like the place where monsters and humans fight endless wars, and more like the place where people just try to survive together, where they share food and space and the hard work of being decent to each other, even when it costs something. Pike never saw himself as a hero. Heroes wore armor and carried swords and saved kingdoms. He just wore an apron and carried tools and saved one person. But maybe that's what heroes actually are. Not the people who save everyone, but the people who save someone and keep saving them, day after day, meal after meal, small act after small act, until the world changes. Not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly. Like water shaping stone, imperceptible day by day, but inevitable over time. Pike and Zykra didn't save the world, but they saved each other. And that turned out to be enough. If Pike's story taught us anything, it's that small acts matter. That one person choosing kindness can change everything. That breakfast can save lives. That brooms can carry more weight than weapons. And here's the thing. You're part of this too. By watching until the end, you've chosen to spend your time with stories about orcs and humans, learning to see each other as people. That's not nothing. That's everything. So if this story moved you, if it made you feel something, if it reminded you that the world needs more people like Pike and Zykra, subscribe to Orc-Bound Tales. Because we're building a community here, a place where fantasy isn't just about battles and magic. It's about the quiet courage of choosing connection over fear, of choosing to care when it would be easier not to. And leave a comment. Tell me which moment hit you hardest. Was it Pike standing in the doorway, Zykra holding the broom, Elder Yashra showing up? Your words matter. They tell me what stories to tell next. They help this channel reach more people who need to hear that kindness isn't weakness. And if you enjoyed this, hit that like button. Not because I'm asking, but because the algorithm is like Drusk. It only respects strength in numbers, and every like is a small act of rebellion against a system that wants to bury stories like this. We're all building something here, one story at a time, one view at a time, one small act of support at a time, just like Pike building furniture, just like Zykra sweeping floors, just like breakfast changing the world. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. Until the next tale.